Okay, I'm going to go over some of the last few structure exercises because a lot of people had trouble with these, and I'm afraid that maybe one or two things were not covered in your book or the lesson. So looking at page 8 of the structure lab exercises, it says that the running workout structure below holds information about your users' running workouts. However, you decide to add information about average mile time. It wants us to add a computed property called average mile time. So, first of all, what is computed property? So, computer property is just a variable, but instead of assigning it like average mile equals 100 or 0, you actually compute what you assign to that variable. So it's like doing an assignment statement. Something equals something. And so this computed property is going to use the distance and the time to compute the average mile. Because it's an average, we're going to make that a double because we want to have decimal numbers. We're going to assume that the distance is in meters, and then we're going to convert meters into miles. It says 1,600 meters is a mile. 1,600 meters is a mile. So we're going to assume the distance is in meters. Okay, then it says create an instance of running workout, and meaning we know what an instance is, so we're going to create a running workout and we're going to print the average mile time property. So we're going to print this out that we created, and we're going to check to see that it works. So first of all, it tells us we're going to back up, and it says add to the structure a computed property called average mile time. I'm going to define it as double because it's an average. So this is a computed property. This is what it looks like. So it's a variable, it's just that I'm going to give it a value. I'm going to compute something. And what I'm going to compute is the time divided by the distance. And then I'm going to test this out to see if it actually works. So let's say I'm going to create an instance of this. This is what I'm doing now. Create an instance of running workout. Copy that. Okay. Create an instance and print the average. So the instance would be var, and you can use any variable, whatever you want. I'm going to call it R1 equals running workout. So R1 is the instance of this structure. You can have an R2, an R3, etc. Okay, and then it's really nice, it tells you what to put inside the parentheses. Remember, we're initializing this instance. We can initialize it either by saying R1 dot distance equals, R1 dot time equals, R1 dot elevation equals, or we can just put it inside the parentheses and pass it all the values to initialize our running workout. So I'm just going to press tab. And notice when I press tab, it has distance, time, and elevation. And then here is where I'm going to put my numbers. So this is what I'm going to initialize it to. So whatever distance that I want, I'm going to say that the distance, So the distance is in meters. So let's just put 1,600. And let's say that the time is let's see, the time, what does it say how we want to do time? So time divided by distance. So we'll say, I'm guessing it's minutes. Yeah. So this was, okay, we'll just try it, see what happens. So we say 10 for time, and elevation, we'll put 10 for elevation. Okay, and then now what we want to do is we want to print the average mile property and check that it works properly. Okay, so we're going to print. And then my instance is R1, so I'm going to say R1 dot. And then over here it says average mile time, so I could just press tab. Or not. There we go, average mile time. And that's all that I have to do. So it says here that my distance was 1,600. My time was 10. It took 10 divided by 1,600. Okay, so 10 divided by 1,600, and then multiply that times 1,600, and that gives us 10. And then what I would do at this point, hold on one second. So anytime that you're doing calculations, you just want to test that everything works okay. So make sure that it makes sense to you. So right now this is not making sense to me. So I'm gonna get a calculator. I'm gonna type in my time, which is 10 minutes. I'm gonna divide it by the distance, which is 1,600 meters. And then I'm gonna multiply that times 1,600, and that equals 10. So it says that my average mile time was 10. Actually, that makes sense. So it means that I did 1 mile in 10 minutes. So let's see if I go 2 miles. Let's say, so 1,600 plus 1,600 is 3,200. Okay, and then I'm going to keep my time the same. Again, you're trying to, when you code, you also want to make sure that you've done your calculations correctly, so you've done this formula correctly. So you just want to test numbers, and I just test them by using my calculator, making sure that what I'm seeing it printing is what I'm expecting. So if I did 1,600 meters in 10 minutes, that means it was an average of 1 mile in 10 minutes. So if I do 3,200 in 10 minutes, I should expect that it would be 5. So divided by 3,200 equals, then I multiply times 1,600, and I get 5, which is what it prints out here at the bottom, and you see it here on the right. So everything, it looks like it's calculating correctly, and I've done what the program has asked me to do. Okay, so, and by the way, if you don't know how to calculate average mile, let's say that you're here and you're like, well, I have no idea how to calculate average mile. Maybe you didn't know that time divided by distance is average mile. Then go, look it up on the internet. Sometimes they'll have programs, they'll say, find the area of a circle, and you're like, I can't remember what the formula for area of a circle is. Just go online and type in what is the formula for blah blah, and it will pull it up for you. Okay. So don't get scared of any simple math like that. So in this one, it says, in other app exercises, you've provided encouraging messages to the user based on how many steps they've completed. A great place to check whether or not you should display something to the user is in a property observer. Okay, yeah, so this one, I know that I did not go over this, so I don't know if this is in your book or not. So let's talk about property observers. So property observer, again, this is your properties. You have var steps, you have var goal. So you have two variables and a function. Those are the properties of your structure. And let's see here. A glad to check whether or not you should do this property observer. So an observer is something that checks every time you use this variable steps. It's going to check to see if, like, every time steps gets updated, you can do some kind of check. Like, let's say that you update steps and you want to see if they're at 5,000 steps, and if they're at 5,000 steps, you want to give them a message like, great job, you're halfway there. If they're at 6,000 steps, you want to give them another message. If they're close to the 10,000, give them another message. So it basically sits there and looks at the variable, and every time the variable gets updated, you can do a check on that variable. Okay, so a property observer uses a keyword called will set. Will set is your keyword, and you use it in whatever property that you want to observe. So we're going to observe steps. It says in the steps structure below, add a will set, that's the property observer, to the steps property. Okay, so this is the steps property. And here's where I want to add my will set. And inside there is, I will check whatever it is that I want to happen. So I'm going to check at steps and post messages or do whatever it is that I want to do. So here it's telling me what to do. It says check if the new value is equal to goal. And if it is, print a congratulations message. Okay, I'm going to copy that. Put that here. Helps me remember what I'm supposed to do. Check if the new value is equal to goal. Okay, so if new value is equal to goal, then I'm going to print congratulations. You reached your goal today. Okay. Now, new value here is let's see here, referencing the steps, and we have the variable goal right here. So I'm going to actually set my goal, what I want my goal to be for my steps. There's a function called take step. Every time I take a step, it adds 1 to step. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to test this. So every time I do something, I want to test it to make sure that it's doing what I want it to do. So I'm going to go out here, and I'm going to first, always when I test a structure or class, I'm going to create an instance of it. So var, call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Jeanette. and I'm going to set that equal to steps. And I'm going to there we go, tab. So I want steps to be I don't know, 9,000, and my goal is 10,000. Okay. So then I'm going to do steps dot take step. Oh no. Jeanette, take steps. There we go. So Jeanette is the instance of the structure, and then I'm calling take step. So I'll call this function. It's going to add 1 to 9,000. So I'm going to print Jeanette dot steps. Okay, so my steps are at 9,000. My goal is 10,000. I call take step. Take step adds 1 to my steps. So now I'm at 9,001 because I printed that. I'm at 9,001. So let's say that I change this to 1, 2, 3. So I was at 9,999. I took a step. It went up to a 1. It went up by 1. So I'm at 10,000 now. Here it checks to see if this new value for steps is equal to goal. It is equal to goal. So it printed, congratulations, you reached your goal today. And I just printed steps there to see that it is 10,000. Okay. So every time you have a structure, create an instance. You can initialize it this way or initialize each value separately. So what I mean by that is you can say we'll just do it this way. My mind's going blank now. Okay, let's look at the next exercise. Okay, so here we have a structure called user. It has 3 properties, 3 variable properties, 2 strings and an integer. It says imagine that you have an app that requires the user to log in. You may have a user struct similar to the one shown below. However, in addition to keeping track of specific user information, you may want to have a way of knowing who the current logged in user is. Okay, so it says create a current user type property on the user struct and assign it to this. Okay, copy that. I'm just going to put it here because that's what it wants me to do. And then it says now you can access the current user through the user struct. Print out the properties. Print out the properties. Okay. Okay, so first of all is we're going to create a current user type property on the user struct. Okay. So we have current user only reason I called it that is because it told me to call it current user. Second. Okay. All right, so we have variable current user, and here's the part. Create a current user type property on the user struct. On the user struct. So that means that this is what it wants. So we're making a current user of type user. So this is a variable that is can now contain these three variables. And then what we want to do is we want to assign it to the user object representing you. So we're going to assign it a username, email, and age that represents us or me. So the string is a username. So I can put whatever I want. Username XYZ 1, 2, 3. That's my username. An email xyz@blah.com. Age. And then it added current user, but we don't want current user on there. Okay, and then we want a function. It says, oh, then it says we want to print this out. Oh, I lost my little closing. Notice I lost the little closing bracket there. Okay, so here, something that I want to do is I want to move. Okay, so notice here it says expected separator. And let's see, what does it expect? Colon, user equals everything's okay. Yeah. So if we put, let's move this. Oh gosh. Okay, so it matters where we place, and it still needs an expected separator. What does it want? Oh, I didn't put my quotes around my strings. These are strings, so it's expecting quotes. Sometimes with errors, I didn't read all the errors. I'm really bad about reading the errors, but sometimes when it gives you errors, it doesn't actually tell you everything that it's what it's really needing. So it's difficult to figure out the error. So here it says missing argument, current user, and call. So I'm going to put something. First of all, there's something called static, and what static does. Let's talk about that first. Static is if I create an instance of user. I'm sorry. If I, especially with classes, if I use static, if I if I like create a class and then I create a subclass, the subclass cannot change anything in my class that's static. So it means it's not gonna be allowed to change this this value. So here I've created my current user, which is a variable of type user, and I want it just to have these three values. So current user is not going to be something that's required anymore in user. It's going to be static, and I cannot change it. So the next thing that it wants me to do is to print out the properties of current user. Let's see, create a current user type property in the user struct below and assign it to a user. Now you can access the current user through the user struct. Print out the properties of current user. Okay, so printing out the properties of current user, I'm actually going to do that inside my structure, not outside my structure. So I'm going to do it right here. And once again, this is going to be a static function because I don't want it to, I just want it for this particular structure. And if for some reason this is, although you can't do that with structures, but with classes, if you were to take your class and create subclasses, inherit from a class, then you wouldn't want to change these values. So I put function login user, and then expected, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to do that now. And then inside I'm just going to say current user so current user is this guy right here, and that's going to equal to user. And that's it, just to user. Current user equals user. And then I'm going to print current user dot username. So current user dot username is a person that's logged in, so it should give me XYZ. Okay, so notice here at the bottom it says type properties and methods, blah blah. Note, to match this opening, so struct user, and then has a little thing. So if you look at struct user here, I deleted the I'm recording. Sorry about that. Children calling me. So on here, I had missed the close bracket. Okay, so now I'm going to make an instance. And I think it says here, the user stuff, there might be good candidates. Before I do that, let's just do the following. Let's go ahead and print. I just want to see that this stuff is working. So I'm going to print, where's my escape? Sorry, I have a new computer. I don't even know where my escape key is. There it is. I have a new Mac, and it's getting used to it. Okay, so we have print. So what first thing I want to do is I want to print. Let's just try and see if we can print. Well, first of all, let's make a instance. So the instance is going to be called, let's call it user1 equals user. And then it's going to take three things: user name, email, and age. So username, let's call it XYZ123, email XYZ23 at blah.com. Okay. Alright, so I made a new user, and then I'm going to say user1 dot, let's print, well no, let's not print anything. Let's say user1 dot, let's just try, can we actually call this function? So let's call user1 dot, now notice that it has these variables, okay, and nothing else. So let's just try log in. So notice at the bottom it says static member login cannot be used on an instance of type user. Because we made this static, which I was trying to say earlier, but I did a really bad job. Because we made this static, I can't use it when I create an instance of a variable. So I created user1, it doesn't let me use login because it's static. So it can only be used inside the struct, it cannot be used outside the struct when I create an instance. Okay? But always when you put the period there, it tells you what you can use. So that was another hint. Another hint is that I only had 3 variables here that I could have access to. So it tells me what I can have access to and what I cannot have access to. Okay, so if I print username, then there it is. It prints XYZ123. Okay, so let's keep going down here and we'll see how we use these in a minute. There are other properties and actions associated with the user structure that might be good candidates for a type, property, or method. A type property is this. These are type properties. Type properties. Methods. These are methods like login, function. Things that have the word function are methods, but these are static, so you can't call them when you create an instance of it. So that's what methods are. It says one might be a method for logging in. Go back here and create a type method. Oh, I already did that. Okay. So it says create a type method called login user, where user is of type user. In the body of the method, assign the passed in user to the current user property and print out a statement using the user's name saying that the user has logged in. Okay, we did that here. So we passed it user, we said current user equals user, and then we print the user that's currently logged in. And it says call the login user method and pass a different user instance than what you assigned to current user above. Observe the printout in the console. So it's asking me to call login user and give it a different user than XYZ123. So we're going to let, and then we'll call this user 2 equal user. So in here, instead of putting XYZ and all this, we'll put some other user. So we'll call this Joe the user. Email address joe@mail.com, and Joe is 22 years old. Okay, so we've created something different than what's inside here. And then what it wants us to do is to test, let's see, what does it say? We pass it a different user instance. Oh, and then now we have to call the login user. Okay, so to call it, we're going to say user. So only the structure can call login user. We'll say user period. Notice that user can call, we can initialize the structure. We can change current user. We can use this variable, and we can use the function login user, which is what it wants us to do. It wants us to call login user, and then inside what we're going to put is user 2. Oh, I keep forgetting mine. So it said let user 2, so it says here there's an error, and it shows me right here the error. It doesn't really say anything about needing the quote. Oh, let's see, must be consistent. Yeah, it doesn't really say anything about needing the quotes, but I just know that it needs the quotes because I know it's supposed to be a string. Okay, so now I'm going to run it again. What does it want now? Let's see. Oh, right here it needs white space. That's really, this white space here, it's very picky. So in most, I would say all languages that I've worked with, and that's a lot of languages, it doesn't have to have this. You can have it like this and it's totally happy. Oh, so it has to, in Swift, it has to be consistent. So if you don't put white space on one side, don't put it on the other. Interesting. And there's the error. Okay. Learned something new today. All right, so where were we? So so it says XYZ123, Joe the user. So what happens is we call in login user, and it says the logged in user is, and it prints the log. How about we print something over here that tells us a little bit more about the message? Why don't we say is logged Okay, so I want to, so here we go. It's going to say Joe, the user, is logged in. This is printing from here. Let me take this out because it's confusing. There we go. So I just want to see what this does. So I initialize it with Joe, the user. I call the login static function, and it gives me who's logged in. Now, if I don't, let's see. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. Again, the static we saw can only be called by the structure and not by instances of the structure. And I don't think that that was in the lesson. If it was, I don't remember it. Let's go to exercise 10. So I think this one you'll be able to do on your own after you've seen me do the other two. Let me just take a look. I don't think there's anything new on this one. This one is going to ask you to add some variables, add a function. Let's see, in another exercise you added a computed property representing the average mile time from a run. However, you may want to have a calculator of sorts that users can use before their run to find out what mile time they need to average in order to run a given distance. In this case, it might be helpful to have a type method on running workout that can be accessed without having an instance of running workout. Okay, so this is the key here. Have a type method. Here we go. Okay, so have a type method on running workout. Running workout is a structure that can be accessed without having an instance of running workout. Remember, the only way that you can do that is if you use the word static. So if you use the word static and create a method, a function that can be accessed, so now this function, whatever we call it, function B, function BBB can be accessed by running workout without ever having to make an instance of running workout. So you can say var person 1 oh actually that I don't want to create an instance, so you can say print running workout dot BBB. And so the function has to have open and close parentheses. Okay, so in here this is doing nothing right now, but I just want to show you when it says creating a method. Here's a method on running workout that can be accessed without having an instance. You got to make it static. Okay. Let's see, what else does it say on here? So instead of calling it BBB, they're telling you to call it mile time for. That's going to be the name of your function. And It's going to have two parameters, distance and time, both type double. So it's going to have stuff inside the parentheses. Oh, and it's going to have a return value. So you got to go back and look to see how you return values. Remember, if your function returns a value, you're going to put the little arrow here and the type that it's returning. And then the type double. And then if I do that, then in here I've got to say return. If I don't say return, it's going to give me an error. So return something. Right now I'll just return a double. But you're going to calculate something in your method called mile time for. Has a return value of a double, the body of the method. What's going to do in here is it's going to calculate the average mile time needed to cover the past in distance, in the past in time. Assume that distance is in meters and that 1 mile is 1,600 meters. Call the method from outside of the structure and print the results to ensure that it works properly. So remember, to call the method from outside the structure, you don't create an instance because it's static. You just say running workout.bbbb. So what you'll be doing is you'll be calling running.workout.miletime4 instead of BBB, and then inside you'll have two numbers, two doubles. One is going to be your distance, one is going to be your time. Okay. Well, I hope this was helpful. Sorry that it's a really long video, but I hope that it helped out.